So I just finished watching the opening ceremony to Vegas's Grand Prix weekend. It's not cringy, don't worry. The lineup was fairly solid, and it was nice and simple with the boxes on the start-finish straight. This was presented by the city of Las Vegas and Formula One, and Vegas does know how to throw a party. This could have been worse, trust me. But yes, all of the hubbub on social media was 100% correct. This definitely felt like the Hunger Games, especially when you got the likes of Alex Jakes going, "Ladies and gentlemen, your teams!" Fuel to the fire of Max Verstappen saying that they all looked like clowns up there. I didn't think it was that bad, it was fine. But does that mean that every time a driver DNFs that we're going to see their picture on the sphere? Because we have seen it already, and that instead of the DNF, they are the fallen? So if we have a massive turn 1 incident, everyone else is going to be going around the track and going, "Ladies and gentlemen, here are the fallen." God, did they die? They got to use that sphere somehow, they got to make some money back. Most teams did bring liveries, but there have been some stick in the muds. Mercedes haven't brought one, Haas haven't brought one. Aston Martin have kind of relegated it down to a Rolling Stone sticker on the car. Yeah, rock and roll. Here's my worst to best of the ones who decided to actually have some fun. Alpine. They literally just changed the textures in Photoshop for the blue from flat to clouds. Something you could do in a minute. Williams. Sorry chaps, this isn't it. I get the idea and it's in keeping with Vegas, but those colors really do not work with the overall car design. The Austin livery with just the American flag, that was so much classier. They should have just done a variation of that, really. Just not this. Ugh. But hey, at least it's relevant to the location. McLaren. After their bangers of the Triple Crown and Silverstone Chrome liveries, this was a letdown. It just showcases Jack Daniels. But the numbering on the airbox looks cool though. Alfa Romeo. Not bad. This kind of reminds me of the Hearts test livery from 2019 they had, only with playing cards, since Stake is their title sponsor. But they did leave it late in the day though. I was really thinking that, really? Alfa Romeo's Stake not bringing a casino-themed livery? And hey, it's a nice little callback to their first livery after swallowing up Sauber and their penultimate race with them. Red Bull. Very nice. It's a fan-made livery again, like with Miami and Austin, but this one is very classy. And understated, take notes Williams. And the purple really reminds me of the days of Red Bull Infinity. AlphaTauri. Ooh, that's kind of wild. It's like you took the Red Bull livery, made it black and white, and stretched it on the vertical by 300%. That's gonna look mad down the straights. And if you're confused as to why the AlphaTauri looks like this, they are doing a fashion collaboration. We've got Yuki and Liam just showcasing their wares, so this is fair. AlphaTauri is a fashion label. This has definitely left a very big impression. It's very striking. You're not gonna forget about it. And then of course there's Ferrari, still the best. It's classy, simple, and a callback to Ferrari's time in America in the 1970s. Like with the AlphaTauri design, it's not exactly Vegas themed, but it's still something different. It's nice, it contrasts well, considering it's nighttime, you just got the red and white, it's not too complex. And hey, if you're going to go down the heritage route, the Scuderia has that in spades. Or is it clubs, or parts, or diamonds, or something that they can use for the curb? Because even though there's been lots of controversy with the Vegas track, people have been very keen to distract us with going, "Oh, look at the curbing, it's got the suits of cards on there." Yeah, that's cute, but, you know, the other stuff doesn't go away, you know? But considering one of those little foibles and quirks, what's the weather going to be like really now we're just days away? It's not going to be as cold as many people feared. The most recent forecasts are pegging the temperatures at night to be between 9 and 11 degrees Celsius, which are more like the temperatures we saw for the 2020 Eiffel Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. Many of you helpful folk reminded me about in the comments because honestly, 2020 to me was just an absolute blur, so I appreciate you calling me out and reminding me about that race. But either way, this temperature that we're seeing for Vegas is much lower than we have seen at any other circuit this season. It's going to be a bit of a challenge, but not quite as much of an ice rink as we were fearing. But the chances of rain are there. It's about 20% or so, mostly on the Saturday. In other news, Netflix had that weird golf collaboration, the Netflix Cup, and Carlos Sainz did win. And like Lando, his best friend, he broke the trophy. In a more spectacular fashion as well, he literally just dropped it from his hands and it went smash. But I don't think he's going to lose too much sleep about it. It looked way cheaper than the Hungarian trophy that cost tens of thousands of euros. And the one from Brazil where Lando opens the lid and tries to find if there's chocolate inside of it, which there isn't. As for the track layout itself, people were curious as to where the DRS activation is going to be for the long straight down the strip. And Alberto Fabrega, one of the saviors of many information, and probably not on Fernando Alonso's Christmas card list, considering all of the chicanery he was giving us a couple of weeks ago, has shown us that the DRS activation for the strip is going to be about half a mile before turn 14. So about halfway down the straight, which is a little bit further along than I thought it would be. It's kind of like Baku. I thought it would have been more like where the detection zone was going to be. I suppose this means that we're not probably going to be seeing double overtakes or anything like that. But from this perspective, instead of this looking like Spider Pig or something like that from the Simpsons movie, it kind of looks like a dog begging. Hopefully the track itself isn't a dog. This gives me all the more reason to think that Ferrari might have the edge here over Red Bull. Not by much, but just that little bit more. The lower temperatures are very much going to appeal to Ferrari, who does like to light its tyres up. Red Bull does have a little bit of a harder time doing it. They're just a lot more smoother in their temperature delivery for the tyres, and I think they're going to be throwing everything at this track. They probably sense an opportunity to get Charles Leclerc his first win this season, or at least a very decent position. Charles Leclerc is practically guaranteed pole. He does seem very at home here. He seems to like the Vegas environment. That positive attitude is probably going to help him tremendously, especially when you get Max Verstappen moaning every single day about this not being a track that he likes. It's perfectly fine for him to not like it, but the sheer amount of negativity that we're seeing from the guy probably might have an effect on him. Like, he just wants to get this over with and be gone. His words, not mine. He would rather just be done with the whole thing, that this is all for show, this isn't a real race. At the same time, this is Max Verstappen. He still likes to race, so he will find enjoyment no matter where it is. It might be really hard to find, but I still think he is in with a shout for a win. It just won't be handed to him on a silver plate. But you can definitely tell Max's heart is definitely not in it. He would rather just wait a week and then be at Abu Dhabi. And I bet Formula One really isn't happy with the world champion besmirching their little Vegas pet project, which cost about $500 million to put on. And they're like, Max, can you not please? If you don't like it, just shut up. Speaking of press, did you know that General Motors has been confirmed to be an engine supplier for Formula One from 2028? No? Well, I don't blame you, because the Formula One website made no announcement whatsoever, or if it did, it was quickly swept away, because I was looking on that website, I could not find it easily. In fact, I couldn't find it at all in the time when I was writing this script, and they had approval from the FIA for General Motors to be the 7th engine supplier for Formula One going into the late 2020s. 7 of them! That's crazy. For a while, it looked like we were only going to have 3. What this really tells me is that this is just getting really silly now. When Audi were announced, they made a big song and dance about it, Formula One. When Honda announced that they were going to be partnering with Aston Martin, they made a big song and dance about it. Not as much as Audi's, because Honda is a little bit flaky, really flaky. Now with General Motors, one of the biggest American companies out there, nothing. It was up to other publications to announce the news. That is so telling, isn't it? They really do not want this pair on the grid, or at least just General Motors, but wow, okay. This drama's only going to get worse, isn't it? Now, speaking of drama, you know the whole thing about Helmut Marko and Sergio Perez, about how Sergio has completely fallen apart this season, and mostly it's been down to Helmut Marko's negative comments sort of fueling the fire in the media? Well, that same guy has done a complete 180 and has been praising Checo. Marko's now been stating that there's no shame in Checo being bested by Max, because Max always destroys his teammates, and Perez surviving for 3 seasons in that manner is a major achievement that he should be proud of. I'm sorry, what? This is the same guy who pretty much reduced Checo's stock price in Formula One to practically 0. This is the guy who is majorly responsible for Sergio Perez being mostly despised by the F1 fandom and people wanting him out of his Red Bull seat before his contract. I think this is a little bit too little too late, mate. You should have been saying this earlier on in the year. He even brings up the whole thing about Miami, about being demolished, and that it's not that big of a deal, that it's fine, it's nothing to worry about. The fact that Checo's been around for so long, that's really good. He has plenty of mental fortitude, which he's really not had that much of. He's had to seek counseling, Helmut. This is really out of touch. Especially when you compare it to 2021, when Checo was 4th in the driver's standings, and you didn't really hear that much criticism from Red Bull at all. In fact, they were praising him. He was doing his job as the teammate. We heard Max Verstappen saying, Checo is a legend. It's been mostly negative comments for everyone. So, oh my goodness. And you want to know another thing that Helmut Marko's been saying? That he's practically given up trying to look for the next Max Verstappen because he doesn't exist, according to Helmut, which is really, really galling because he was doing an interview about their latest signing in the Red Bull Junior program, Oliver Goethe, a Danish-German driver who'd been doing very well in junior categories, and saying he's a good driver, he's a good guy, very dedicated. You're not going to mean that makes Max Verstappen, though. Wow. Self-esteem. As for the other teams, it's kind of hard to tell who is going to do well on the grid because we really don't have a baseline that is credible. Most people who have been supporting the Las Vegas circuit have likened the Vegas track to Monza. Monza? Really? I can kind of see why, but there are some very glaring flaws here, folks. For starters, the temperatures are much lower than they are at Monza. The track conditions are a lot better because Monza sees constant activity from many motorsports, so the maintenance is constant. Not to mention also you have wider runoffs. In fact, you have tons of runoffs, whereas in Vegas, you have very little. If you make a mistake, you're more than likely to go into the barriers and that's your race done. But, okay, I do get it. There are really long straights, there are some very tight chicanes, and some very long sweeping corners. If I had to liken it to any other track from previous Formula 1 seasons, I would say it's more like the Indy Road circuit. But trying to peg the grid down specifically, that is genuinely tricky. But I certainly do know that Alpine is not going to have a good time here. They already have an underpowered engine, and their car is just overall not that great. Yeah, Gasly can put in a surprise, so he might be close to points, but I would be really surprised to see both cars out of Q1 here. Everyone is going for a low downforce configuration, similar to Monza, which is another similarity to that track, is a good sign that people are going to be finding top speed, and Alpine does lack that. Alpha might be closer to points, but Haas stands a genuine chance of a point or two because Nico Hülkenberg is taking matters into his own hands by reverting back to the old car instead of the new one because he prefers it. And that renders the Austin upgrades to him absolutely meaningless. Wow. Haas's situation as a team is dire. They brought only one major upgrade this season, and they still failed at that. They are very lucky to have Nico Hülkenberg. I bet he can't wait to leave that team. AlphaTauri might score as well, since the uptick has been very impressive as of late since they adopted the RB19's rear suspension. And if Daniel can be on the same lap as everyone else, he probably will make a better impression than Yuki, because Yuki is quite surprised as to why the team's doing so well. It's really hard to gauge what McLaren are up to, because they kept their cards really close to their chest, which is very apt considering where we're at. And the other teams are being a little bit coy. I mean, Ferrari, like I said, will do well because they can light up the tyres. Same goes for Haas. And Aston Martin, not too sure about them either. But Williams, everyone's giving Albon a really good shout for the top 5. I am too. If Williams can get into Q3 and be able to stay there, forming a DRS train, I think Albon is very much on for points. And the same goes for Logan. If he can get a decent Q2 finish, or even Q3 like he did at Zandvoort, I think it's odds on for a double points finish for that Grove team. But again, Albon has to not make any silly mistakes and breach track limits, which has happened this season. And if Logan bins it, Williams' last choice to score some decent points and hold on to P7, even though they really don't mind losing it, it's really not going to do his odds for 2024 any good. Right. On to the predictions. Considering that I predicted that Hamilton would win in Brazil and he was nowhere close, I am still going to stick my neck out and say that by the narrowest of narrow margins, Charles Leclerc holds on to pole and he goes for the victory. It's going to be very, very tight between he and Max, but I feel like Max will definitely be a very close second. We might be able to see glimpses of what we saw at the beginning of the 2022 season and during 2019. Those two fighting each other is going to be very, very spicy. Max may be able to get a snifter and get ahead a little bit, but hopefully Charles might be able to hold him off and make use of the fact that they can manage the tyres better and keep them alive, and Red Bull may be having a bit of a harder time of that here. And of course, Max's overall negativity might have an impact on him. Might. Probably won't, but it's there. Charles is enjoying his time here more, and that positivity and overall optimism is going to do Charles the world of good, because it's very clear that if Charles is in a good mood, he will perform. Who's going to be joining them on the podium? Well, honestly, I'm really not sure, but I'm going to have to stick it out to Lando Norris because he's been on the podium so often lately. He has been running rings around Oscar Piastri at the moment, who's kind of fallen off a cliff at the moment, but either way, I do see the McLaren back on the podium again. Nobody was really suspecting it at Singapore, and Qatar, that was just marvellous. So McLaren have been able to overcome some of their woes and some of their disadvantages. Ferrari might just have the edge in terms of turning on the tyres, because McLaren did admit during the Brazilian weekend that's something they do need to work on their tyre deg a little bit. As for who's going to be fourth, I think it's going to be Carlos. There will be at least one mistake in the pit stops, and I think it's going to fall to Carlos Sainz taking the L on that one. And it will be a shame, because I do envisage a really decent shot at a Ferrari front row, but I feel like there will be a mistake in the pits or in terms of strategy to one of the drivers at least. Fifth place, I think it'll be Checo. Checo will be bouncing back from Brazil. That furious fight he had with Fernando, keeping it clean, I rate that really, really well for his future at Red Bull. He will see out his contract from that race. He just held his own there. He didn't make a mistake, and those cars were really, really equal on the day. So I think that was a fair fight, and I think that was the best that Checo could do considering his woes in qualifying that weekend. He doesn't need to push all the way now. All Checo has to do is just bring it home ahead of Hamilton. Give Red Bull something they've never had before, a complete clean sweep of the standings. That's all he's got to do. That is a very low bar, and I think Checo will clear it. So as we're approaching the final American race of this season, you might be wondering why Formula One is so stubborn to let an American engine supplier and American team in, considering they've been wanting nothing but American money from the fans. Well, if you go watch this video next, you will find yourself completely clued up as to why there's a bit of a stalemate and reluctance for Andretti to join the grid. Yet the FIA is okay with it.